All right, we'd like to welcome everybody tonight. Thank you for coming. I'm going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And we've got the consent agenda. Is there any discussion items? Anybody want anything to discuss? I noticed on there Mr. Roth is retiring. I see him out in the audience. Would you like to speak to that maybe just for a second? We're sad you're retiring, but we get it.
Great spot in my life to set sail on I think, maybe I'm a little biased, but a great career, 37 years in 2 different districts, so, and in 2 states. So just wanted to give everyone plenty of time though. You hate that rush at the end of the year. Someone decides to retire. People have already found positions. I really wanted to do this in a thoughtful manner. Mark and I have talked through the process, and this will give our district, I think, the best opportunity to get the best person in a great time frame, because I really believe that this is the best job in the Treasure Valley that will be coming up this year. The pay structure, because of all the work you have done, fits. The right person is out there with great enthusiasm and strength. Leading a high school is a big job. And I know that person is going to be, and you're going to have several to pick from, partly because of the time frame. So I'm excited to see that part of it, and excited to move on to a new chapter of my life, but I will really struggle, and at times I do now, missing the students and just the energy of our building. And this is an amazing town. I get it. Every town has challenges, but fighting through those and solving the problems, this board, all the professionals I work with, everyone has come together to do that. And I'm just proud of the community. It's a great time to find someone to lead Milton High School.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know how you're going to sail away in a square body, but you'll manage.
I think it'll be an old car.
And we'll start looking, posting that job probably near the end of November, beginning of December, just to give plenty of time. We'll leave it open for a while to
Very good.
give people opportunities to look at that and consider their options.
Will you go?
Yeah, we'll be looking at, it'll be open in district and out of district at the same time. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all you've done.
Very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And I probably feel the board feels the same. All right. With that, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Good.
Second that.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Let's move on. Number 5. We've got our audit
Yep.
report, and we'll turn that over to Alicia and Dan.
Hi there.
Hello, you can come up to the table if you want.
That's right. Wow, look at this. My name is Dan Coleman. Did the audit for the school this last year. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to review the audit report. A lot of information there. So I'll hit the highlights of what I feel like you guys should be aware of. And then at the end, we can open it up for questions or discussion if you have any. So as for the audit process, we sent out a shopping list early on to Alicia. It's got 25, 30, 35 items on it that we'd like her to get organized. Once she has that ready, she sends it over, and then we begin the audit process. And so everything that we looked at this last year checked out good. Everything was fine. Nothing negative to report to you tonight. Big story this last year really has been COVID funding. Schools have received a lot of it, and that's awesome because it helps us out budget-wise. But at the same time, it was a lot of work tracking that money, reporting it, that kind of stuff. And so I think everybody knew that we got a lot. Alicia kind of felt all the pain of reporting on it. So, and she's continuing to do that. Sounds like They had several rounds of narratives that you had to submit, and now they're starting to audit that federal money. And so it's been a lot of work. So we appreciate Alicia and all her hard work getting things ready to go.
If I could just speak to that really quickly, our first audit report of our ESSER funds is this Friday, due
I
this
have it
Friday.
completely uploaded by Friday and then
And then they'll give us a report on that as well.
Okay.
3 reports I'll mention briefly. 1 through 4 is the auditor's report. That's where we express our opinion. We've issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, means that the information is accurate and you as a board can rely on it to make decisions. So best opinion that we can give. Nice job there. Pages 44 and 45. We've also issued a report on internal control and compliance. So when we do the audit, we look at internal controls, make sure that there are policy and procedures in place to protect the school's assets. The main one that we really like to see lately is a bank statement review, monthly bank statement by somebody other than the bookkeeper. And we found that that has caused a lot of issues in the past. And so we are recommending that to all the schools that we audit. That is also a clean report, no findings there, so nice job. Pages 46 and 48 is the 3rd report I'll mention on major programs. When a school spends over $750,000 of federal money, it requires actually an extra audit. So a second audit, we refer to it as a single audit. And so we pick major funds, major federal funds, we go through those. That report is clean as well. Everything checked out there good also. So nice job. You guys spent about $6 million of federal funds this last fiscal year. Looking at the school's finances, pages 10 and 11 will be a good place to do that. School finance is broken down between major funds and non-major funds. We're going to take a look at the major funds tonight. That first column there is the general fund. We're going to look at the bottom numbers there, 3rd number from the bottom. Carryover, $752,188. Very bottom number, ending fund balance, $2,803,434. So, based on your average monthly expenses, that's about a 1.3 month operating reserve. We recommend a month and a half to 3 months. And so you're right at the bottom end of that recommendation. So doing okay. You could increase it a little bit if that was your desire, and I would be okay with that. That recommendation is just a soft recommendation. It is based on how payments come out from the State Department of Education to school districts. They come out every month and a half to 3 months. So we like a little cash on hand to pay the bills in between those payments. Second column in, Child Nutrition Fund. 3rd number from the bottom, net change in fund balance, $858,358. Very bottom number, $1,043,008. Child Nutrition Fund, a couple of things that you look for. Number 1, the state wants to make sure you're feeding the kids good. Number 2, they want to make sure that you don't build up that fund balance very large. So they actually have a maximum calculation that they'll look at in that Child Nutrition Fund. If you reach it, eventually they could send you a letter and say, hey, how are you guys going to spend that money down? Surprisingly for you guys, that max is $370,000, so you're well over it. But that is what I'm seeing across all the schools that we audit. We audit 100 schools. Because of the additional federal money that's getting sent out of schools, everybody in the Child Nutrition Fund is doing really well. So, and that money will go away in future years, and so it will, we'll go back to that usual federal funding, and so just that alone, that fund balance will start to decrease on its own. So, bond fund, 3rd column over, very bottom number. $5,728,783 in the bond fund. What I look at here is, do we have enough there to pay next year's debt payments? Next year's debt payments are $3.1 million, plenty there to make the debt payments, and so that's in good shape as well. And then just 2 other funds that I'll mention briefly. 4th column is Capital Construction Fund, very bottom number there, $360,000. That is money that's left over from the bond. Should be spent on buildings projects.
Mhm.
And then if you'll flip to page 11 real quick, new to you guys this year is a plant facility fund. Plant facility fund, there's lots of reasons for it, but mostly it's just routine maintenance that happens on a school's facilities.
Mhm.
That is recorded in the plant facilities fund. Very bottom number there, we've got $1,112,148 in that plant facility fund as of June 30, 2022. And I think I've discussed with Alicia and Mark these two funds, and I think he's gonna have more discussion with you guys on that at some point.
In this meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll let him address those further. As far as the non-major funds, you guys have a lot of them. They all zero out at the end of the year, so there's not a whole lot of discussion to have on them. But we do go through them, everything checked out okay. Only other thing I'll mention, I think just briefly is, as far as ESSER money goes, federal money, you guys have about 3.8 million. Does that sound right? To spend. And so you've got a chunk of federal money there to spend. I've noticed that schools that do spend that ESSER money, their general fund balance actually comes up quite a bit. This last year, schools that spent part of it or didn't spend it, some of them that general fund broke even or it decreased a little bit is what I'm seeing. So nice to have that federal money there to spend this next year. So.
Well, we need it, so thank you.
Is there a recommended overage or reserve on the bond fund?
There's not. So the bond fund is extremely complicated, and your bond counsel, when they set that thing up, it's kind of on autopilot. Those guys get in there, they crunch the numbers, and they determine your levy rates, and they have that discussion with Mark, and they make sure that there's going to be enough money in there to pay the debt. And then if the fund balance builds up too large, you have options there. You can keep it, pay off the bond early. There's bond refundings that are out there that are available. I mean, there's options that you can do if that fund balance builds up too large. But no, I mean, but yeah, bond counsel watches it and makes sure that it is good where it's at.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Anybody have questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia, too. Appreciate it. All right, we don't have any signed in visitors, right?
Nope.
To speak?
Well, do we want to just double check?
We'll hold that, Mark.
Yeah, okay, perfect, thank you.
We're good?
Yep.
All right, let's move on to discussion items. We'll go to discussion item A. We're gonna make a correction with our accounts.
Right, and this is the 410 and 420 bond account and plant facility account that Dan just referred to. And I prepared a report with, oh, you've got that up, perfect, thank you. So essentially what happened was, and I want to make clear that having not been a part of the conversations when these decisions were made, there may have been other mitigating circumstances that led to these decisions. But the decision that was made, there's just some effects that we want to make sure that we're keeping track of some funds. Nothing was done illegal. It was just the way that they used the funds made it hard to track. And so we're trying to correct that, and our auditor agreed that it would be appropriate to do this, but it needs to be something that's done with board action because we're moving those amounts between different funds. So the 410 and the 420 bond funds are funds that are created for specific purposes. The 410, when a bond is passed, the tax dollars come in from the 410, from the county, and then they're placed in an account. And then when we start using those funds to pay bills for the construction, buy materials, all of those kind of things that come up, we move them into the 410. And so it's a capital construction to be used, and every time those bills come through, that's where we're paying the bills from. The 420 account is a plant facilities account, which can be used for all kinds of maintenance, building projects, different things throughout the district. You're putting a new roof on a building, you can pull that from plant facility funds. It doesn't have a limitation. The bond funds should be directed at the bond that it was passed for. So, for instance, the only bond that has been passed in recent memory by the district is the high school, which we still have 7 to 8 years of receiving those payments. But the majority of the construction has already been done. That left a certain amount over, that was left over But those funds have to be used for the high school because we received those funds specifically for the high school construction. So that's where we use some of those funds for the resurfacing of the track, because that was a part of that original high school. It was an appropriate use of those funds. When in 2018, the school board or the school district owned two different pieces of property that they determined that they were going to sell. And there's a months-long process to sell property that the district owns. And they went through that property. There was property at Lakes of Talega, which was about 14.4 acres. And then there was a half acre with a home on it that was up near the high school. So two separate properties they determined to sell. And as you can see here, after they went through that process, the first is the approximate total sale, and that's what I have a documentation within the minutes of, is they indicated we sold the Lakes of Talega for $420,000 and the property on Willis Road for $210,000. But then there were realtor fees and different things that came out. And so that specific amount, I couldn't tell you, what the actual sale price was. But what I can tell you is the amount that was deposited into our accounts at that time for the sale. And that's what that right-hand column is the total sale minus any fees in escrow. And you can see that the first one goes up a little bit and the other one goes down, but we were using the same realtor for both transactions. So it's likely they took the fees in escrow out of one to pay the whole amount for both transactions. When we received those funds were placed into the capital construction fund. Now, it's not wrong or illegal to place them there, but it's harder to keep track because those capital construction funds are meant to be used from what you're getting from a bond. The sale of these properties were either donated or purchased previously by the district and should have been placed into the plant facilities fund because they could be used for anything. The board could use that to buy additional property since it was coming from property, but it's up to the board to make that determination. Because they placed it in that 410 fund, the capital construction, it just threw things off when we started looking at what purchases were made. There were purchases made for surveillance equipment and different things, the camera systems that we were putting in the district. Well, that was used for the whole district, and it was coming from the 410 fund, the capital construction, and that was okay because we put the sale of the property in there, but it just made it harder to keep track that this is specifically for bond and this is specifically for the plant facility. Other purchases that were made that could have been made from the plant facility were pulled out of the general fund. And so as we started looking into these funds to make sure that we had the amounts right and we knew where that sale of that property was, we felt like we needed to make an adjustment to take the funds from the sale of the property and have them separated into that plant facility fund instead of into the bond. Now that required taking general fund dollars and placing them in both of these accounts because general funds should have paid for the other things that were billed to these two funds because of how they were placed. And so if we could scroll to the next, right in there. So what in our determinations, and we went back into those funds, we looked specifically at the capital construction fund because we knew that we could follow the bond payments and establish what should have been there if we had never placed those property sale dollars in there. And so as you look here, the capital construction fund balance in June of 2019, we knew based on those records that it should have been $430,926. It was actually much higher because of the sale of those properties. But then as we look at additional revenues from interest on the payments and then payments that went out for different construction projects that were authorized by the district, we saw that you would take out, and that some of that includes the first payments on the track when we made an initial payment, and this last school year. So that 95,000 is what came out. And so what you should have ended with, and what our audit report shows after making these corrections, is $360,602 in the remaining in those bond funds. Now, we had a purchase to make still, not a purchase, but a payment to make, the second payment on the track after completion. Once the track was completed in the summer, we made an additional payment, which takes it down to, I think it's on there. Oh no, it's on the additional documents, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a different document. It's the one of the account. No,
Correction?
it's under the turf.
What was that?
Yeah.
Which document is that?
It is the, one second, I'm sorry about that.
The 410 fund?
Yes, 410. But not the history. Even with my glasses, I can't see that one. And if you'll scroll so we can see. So after making the payments, we went from that 360,000 down to 282. So currently, as of right now, with the corrections made, we are at a balance of $282,622 in that bond account that is left over from the original construction of the high school. And so that's that bond fund. And then if we could switch back to that other account, that other one really quick. Then the other, if we can, right there, the plant facility fund, we took that $112,000 from the sale of properties and placed that in the plant facility fund. Now, if you look at the plant facility fund right now, it's actually closer to $1 million because we intentionally put $300,000 to $400,000 in there for some of the capital projects that we'll be taking on this year. And so the $612,000 is an amount that as a board, at some point you may feel like you need to use to purchase property or go towards another project, whatever it's at the discretion of the board to use those funds. The rest of the funds that are in there right now are funds designed to help support some of those projects we have at the different buildings, repaving of parking lots, some of the roofing at Heights will start pulling from that fund for that. And so what you see there, the amounts there is that's the correction, getting those two funds to those amounts. Any questions on what we're trying to do and making sure that it's corrected?
I'm just curious on the modulars that were purchased, were they paid for from this fund?
No, the modulars are being paid for from ESSER.
Okay.
ESSER funds, because it's an appropriate use that the state has approved to grant more space for students, so. Other questions? Okay, so when we're finished when we get to action items, this is one of the action items we'll need to approve is the correction of these two funds.
Okay.
And that correction is reflected in our audit as well.
Just to follow up on that, so that there's 3.8 million left in the ASHER funds.
ASHER funds, yes.
That could be used for more modulars.
Correct.
And all that.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's good to have it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's move on to discussion item B, the assessment and continuous improvement process. And Paige, step up to the table.
All right, so what we've done here is aligned some of our assessment reporting data to the continuous improvement plan that you approved last month. So this will give us an academic focus that as we go through these assessments through the year that we can report out on our progress toward our growth goals in that regard. So in August, I shared SAT. Last month, I shared fall IRI data. And this month, I'm going to share the IRD fall diagnostic data with you. Are there any questions on this? We've worked to align it to each section of that continuous improvement plan.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm going to test you on your red, yellow, and green. Okay. Green is good.
Green is good, red is stop.
Yes. So a little bit of a different report. Our iReady assessment is given grades K-8, and it's given 3 times a year. So once at the beginning of the year, once mid-year. They're actually going to come up on it in November. And then again in February, students K-8 take it in both reading and math. And at the beginning of the year, this gives us a nice baseline for where our students are starting out at. So you can see that the dark green with the hash mark, that would be students that are mid or above grade level. And this one is our math data. And the green is students who are earlier on grade level, and the yellow is 1 grade level below. And one piece on this first diagnostic that I will say is that yellow, say a student is at 3rd grade, that 1 grade level below, they could be showing a late 2nd grade. So there's a lot of variance in that yellow. And as we progress with our diagnostics, what we like to see is the green grow, the yellow get smaller, and the red get smaller as well. So we are sitting very close to where we started off last year. I was just sharing this information with our K-5 leads. We are total green 23% proficient. Our tier 2 or the yellow is 50%. And our tier 3 is at 27% starting out, which is very similar to where we were last year. You'll see that I gave you a grade level breakdown. You won't see any red in kindergarten because they are not assessed at 2 grade levels or below proficient range. And then you'll see grade 6, 7, and 8. Some of our 9th through 12th graders took it. A very specific group took that, so that was not district-wide on those ones. And then for ELA, that was math. For ELA, trending a little bit higher on the ELA end. So you'll see there, we have starting out with about 33% proficient, 39% in the yellow, and 27% at tier 3 in those areas as well. And then it breaks them down into the domains, Math had it as well, so we can start to pinpoint where our students are struggling at. Our teachers take this data, for example, like at the K-5 level, and they break it apart, and they look at putting groups of students together to really pinpoint those needs. And then hopefully by November, we'll start to see some change, and then even more change as we progress throughout the year.
So the iReady, what do we gauge that against? Like what's that we got a starting point.
Yep.
When's our end point?
So we will look at the endpoint, and it'll be February is the last one that we'll give. Teachers have the option to give it at the end of the year if they choose. Typically, especially grades like 3 through 8, also take the ISAT in the spring. So we're kind of cautious in how much we want to test those kids. So we do gauge it by time of year that we give that last assessment.
So in the iReady winter diagnostic and the iReady spring diagnostic, same information. So we have some benchmarks to see how things are going.
Yeah, you'll get to see the growth in that as well.
Awesome.
Questions, anybody?
No, thank you, Paige.
Okay,
Yes, thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
guys.
for organizing that.
I'll see you next month.
We're so glad. Let's move on to item C. Oh, she just did C, thank you.
Yep, C.
Thank you,
Got 'em both.
appreciate that. Item D, the emergency operations plan review.
Okay, and we went over what we would normally go over in an open session last month. We had more time to take a look at that. We left that here just as an opportunity. If there were any further or follow-up questions from the board, if not, then it just needs to be approved in our action item portion. And then again, a reminder that that's kind of a living document. And so as adjustments need to be made, as there are concerns or questions that come up to you from patrons, anything like that, we can bring them our way. Jake is the representative from the board on that committee. And so you can take them right to Jake and he can bring them to the group. He can share them with me, however you'd like to do that. And then as we make adjustments, we bring it back to the board for approval. And every year at minimum, there's a review of that document.
And that document, only certain eyes see that.
Correct, because it
Clarify
has some of our functions and protocols that we wouldn't want to have out in the public.
And you said annually?
Annually, you review it at minimum, but it can be done sooner if there are concerns that we need to address.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that one? Okay.
All right, let's move on to E, Assistant Superintendent Plan.
Okay, so last month we discussed how we would be approaching the time frame from about December on through June, July of next year with Mrs. Pennington. And so we've put that together a little bit more precisely now in terms of who would be responsible for each of those items. And there can be a little bit of wiggle room in a lot of these, just because, you know, for instance, if Alicia Krantz were assigned to a particular area and needed some help, I'm available, Lori Buckway's available. I mean, there's a team around most of these situations, but these names that are on this form here are who would be ultimately responsible for making sure that those things happen. The key thing that is what has not been determined, and we are working right now, is our human resources in terms of grievances and Title IX issues that might come about. If Mrs. Pennington is not available, we want to have someplace that a person can go if they have a grievance to file against a superintendent, against a principal that maybe they don't feel comfortable coming to a superintendent about. And so we have reached out to a local retired superintendent. That superintendent has given an initial kind of okay that they're interested and willing. We were going to sit down with that person today, but they had a unexpected appointment that they couldn't get out of. So we haven't been able to solidify that that person. But if the board is comfortable with this, this is the approach that we'll take moving forward before we, essentially offer any kind of temporary contract to somebody for that HR piece. That would come to you as a board member.
So we'll probably meet in November if possible.
Correct. But this is kind of how we're looking to move forward. And again, this doesn't necessarily need an action, but if there were concerns from the board on how we're proceeding, now would be a good time to share any of that.
Well, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so when we have that name and solidified, we'll bring that to you as a board so that you can approve that person to be that person, that role in that time period.
So everybody else has agreed to that? I'm looking there.
There's a few of them that are going to take on quite a bit more, and we are working on a compensation arrangement so that for these extra duties, because they're not losing other duties to take these on. And so we are working through a compensation plan for those people that are taking on
That's what I was
extra
wondering,
duties.
because I know.
With the exception of any role that is mine, because that's not something that we would do. That's something the board does. And that's not something we're asking for, because we can take care of that.
Appreciate that.
Any questions?
Sounds good.
Who's Leanne Hansen?
Leanne is our,
She's a
Oh, Leanne, okay.
it's just Leanne.
There's a last name. Okay, I got it.
Oh, that's great. Very, very good detail on that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
It's nice.
All right. We will move on to discussion item F, the dance team out-of-state trip to Orlando, Florida.
Is Michaela here?
Yeah, she's.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Well, you got her
Perfect.
to sleep, sort of, right?
She's not crying,
Oh, that's good.
So she is here for any detailed questions that you might have about the trip. You've seen the trip described in the documentation that you received. Any initial questions about how we're going forward? Because if there are, I'm gonna send them to Michaela.
Florida, do you need extra help?
More chaperones?
I was just curious, there's only 2 coaches and then I think a little thing off to the side that says and parents.
Yeah, so most of the kids have parents who want to come with them on the trip. So we'll have lots of help from parents. And then I also have, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Caitlin Davison. She owns a Zen dance studio. But I work pretty closely with her, so I think we'll try to bring her as a chaperone as well. But the trip itself, the outline number in it is the 24, which is 22 athletes and then 2 coaches, which is who's at high school. And then we'll have a few additional like parents and stuff who come on their own, but it's not described like in the budget that was sent to you. and stuff like that.
So have you gone to this Contest of Champions nationals before?
I haven't personally been to this nationals, but I have been to nationals through USA, which is put on by varsity. But this one fits better with our schedule, with state being in February. State for dance used to be in March. So then the nationals, the USA varsity is at the end of March. But with this competition, it fits better with our schedule just because then the kids don't have to go to the state competition and then practice for another month before they go to nationals. So the dates just work better. I do know that Rigby attended this competition last year with their dance team, Rigby High School, and then Thunder Ridge is also, they've gone a couple years and they're going this year as well. So there's a few Idaho schools who have been to it and they've had good reports, so.
That's fun.
Hope Thunder Ridge isn't bitter about that football game.
No, they won't be. Any questions?
Okay. No, we're fine then.
Good luck. We hope you're successful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's move on to discussion item G, the gifted and talented plan review.
And let Lisa guide us through this one.
And Charlie's here as well, and she put this plan together, so if there's further questions, we can work kind of tag team.
Okay.
But this plan, we have to submit to the state every 3 years, so the last time it was submitted was 2019. Staff has changed a little bit since then, a few of the components have changed as far as identification, and then obviously the goals are a little bit different now than they were in 2019. But overall, very similar structure to where we were then compared to where we are now as far as staffing and what we can support and how we'd like to move forward. So is there specific questions on the plan or pieces you'd like me to highlight?
Was this pretty much the same as the one in 2019?
Very close. Yeah.
So when it was chosen not to be, you weren't gonna do the program?
Well, so in
Back when?
2019, so in 2019, we did have the program in place. And then when we went the spring of 2019, we did have to eliminate some positions in the program. And so there was a cut in some staffing at that time. And then we've regained some of that staffing, but we're fully not staffed back to where we were then. But we are still servicing all K-8 students, which through this, and then we have our high school programs as well that support like the advanced opportunities and those pieces that are more on the gifted and talented side. And so we're still supporting the same number of students, just with less staffing at this point than what we had.
So how many students are in this program?
Shirley, can you speak to the
Gosh,
specific
from
number?
the last state report, 208. And I will say that if I can talk on staffing, we did bring on a school psychologist who is helping with the testing pieces for Gates. So that's taken that a little bit off of the teacher's plate so they can spend more time with kids. The other thing is when we looked at dollars that we had available and looking at all of our dream positions last spring, I met with them and they felt very comfortable that we were in a spot that they didn't want to add another staff member on, that they felt like what we were doing right now, we were in a good place. And then we can talk later about starting to increase. But they were comfortable at that time and they helped create this as well.
So they were a part of,
Go
Absolutely.
ahead, you're okay.
Yeah,
Does Melody go to
all three elementary
the
schools.
GT teacher,
Yeah.
excuse me? Yeah,
So she has days at each of the 3 elementary schools, and then she has one float day where she does do paperwork, she does do some testing. She'll meet individually with kids if she needs to, or families. She'll
mhm,
have those meeting dates, and then Susan Hawk does all of the middle school, and then our secondary is really just through those advanced opportunity pieces
mhm.
that we.
Which there's plenty there for him. It's fine.
so just going through your identification process and looking at how it was broken down and then, in the flow chart. And then looking over here on the other, I'm just concerned about 2 teachers in one site with 208 kids when you've got annual reviews to be looking at and whatever testing that needs to be updated for 3 years. So they felt okay?
Yeah, we really did have a conversation, because on my dream list initially, Cindy, I had added another GT teacher to the dream list to get us back to where we were at. And in my conversations in the spring with them, Paige and I meet with them pretty regularly. They did not want to do that at that time.
So what does their exact program look like if you've got one GT teacher at K-5?
So K-5, she does during intervention times,
Mhm.
as much as she possibly can. And so it's a pull-out program, in some aspects. And we have the teachers, they do not, they excuse everything that's happening in the classroom at that time because they're getting their enrichment activities and their intervention pieces. She does specific unit-based at each grade level. So she goes through probably 5 or 6 units a year that are pretty intensive project-based.
So they go over a period of time?
Yep. And so they go and then there's always a culminating activity at the end. At the middle school, it's STEM. And then after the STEM, we also have the advanced math class with Jody Miney in 7th and 8th grade.
Mhm.
Then we have after-school robotics programs
Okay.
that pull in some of the robotics pieces as well. And then we do have, I don't know the exact number, but we do have some middle school students doing advanced opportunities
Mhm.
as
Okay.
well.
So in the past, have your gen ed teachers had the professional development that's needed to look at differentiating instruction?
So yeah, we've done a lot in the past with some of our PD strands. We've had different people, including GT people, lead our strands on differentiating instructions. Our instructional coaches have done some strands on that as well. We send these 2 ladies, and then I think we had at least one more in our district go to EduFest last year. I don't know if others went on their own, but those are the ones that I know of. They also, it's an unfunded mandate. So I think that's really important for the board to know that the money went away, and our district did a really great job of continuing that budget at the same level that the state did. And so we didn't lose those dollars. So there is professional development also built in to their budgets. And I work closely with them to work through any PD requests that they have, and if we can just fit it in, we will.
Okay.
And then Melody does a beautiful newsletter every month to her families about all of the different offerings in the GT program. And what I can do is send that to Lisa and have her send it to you, and it'll kind of give you a more
That'd be nice.
comprehensive
That would
view of what-
actually be really nice. I'd like to see
Yeah,
that.
I can do that right now, Lisa.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I just, that's a lot.
Well,
It
it's on
was-
the list, it's been on the list every year as a
Yes.
conversation, as we talk FTE and as we look to grow in the spring and
Mhm.
look at those positions. It's a continued conversation since we
Yeah.
did lose that one position.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just that continuum that you
Yes.
have, and sometimes,
And the
Anyway.
208, is that through K through 12 or is that K through 8?
Complete identification, so K through 12. So then once they're identified, I mean, they would stay on as identified when
sorry.
we get to those high schools.
that's why I was wondering where there was not a facilitator for the 9 through 12, but I know but who does that? Counselors?
A lot of
Parents?
it's through our college and career counseling, and then through placement when they make, at the end of 8th grade, when they're still working through some of those STEM classes, there is the transition plan with their 4-year plan going into high school.
Okay.
And that's a consideration during that period of time when they create that plan as well.
And then the
Okay.
STEM classes as well, as
Yeah.
we are increasing those at the high school. A lot of our gifted and talented students fall into those.
Okay. So instead of STEAM activities, you mean STEM, right? Okay. I thought there was a new acronym out there.
But when they put STEAM, they're adding art.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
that-
STEAM is.
Oh, that's what.
So they'll often do art, but it's usually focused on just the STEM.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
All right, let's move on to item H, turf replacement planning and approval.
Okay. So, when the high school was built and, started to be occupied in 2011, we had, artificial turf placed on the football field. Artificial turf has a lifespan of 8 to 10 years, and we are on year 11. As a result, we are recommending that we look at replacing that turf. I put a proposal in front of you on your desk, and I sent that to you.
Is this one?
Yes, that's the one. Thank you. And if we can, if we can scroll up. So actually, I'm sorry, let's stay there for just a second. A couple of things to note when we're talking about the synthetic turf replacement. We have two people here that are going to help us walk through some of this. Justin, would you just stand and raise your hand? Justin Rose and remind me how you pronounce it.
It's Hellas Construction.
Hellas Construction, and they were who put the field in initially. And then Mr. Roth is here to provide any input on that as well. And they're here to help answer some of those questions. But one of the things that is important to note from the board perspective is that Hellas Construction is a part of the interstate consortium of bidders. And what that means is they put in their bids to an interstate consortium that goes through and gives, it helps schools get the lowest price they can. And because Hellas is a part of that consortium, we as a school district don't have to go through that full bid process. Otherwise, we would be having that conversation first. And so Hellas is a part of that consortium, and where they were the ones that put our field in the first place. We felt like that was an appropriate way to go. And so if you'll scroll up, I just want to talk a little bit about the funds, and then we can talk about some of the products and different options that we have. As you look at the remaining MHS bond funds, that's what we were talking about in the previous when we were talking about the plant facility and the bond funds. You have that total remaining $282,000. Also at the high school, and this is something that, I hate to say that we discovered, but we discovered, that was back in 2011. If you can scroll up just a little bit there, Lisa, thank you. The high school started putting funds aside, knowing that in 10 years, this was going to be coming up. And through different fundraisers, ticket sales, different decisions were made all the way through about 2016. There were deposits made into that account. As a board, you have that history of the deposits that were made that was sent to you today. There are a lot of interest payments. We get interest payments throughout that whole period, but there were large bulk amounts that were saved up through 2016. After 2016, there weren't any additional payments made. But it amassed $306,993. That can be, that the purpose was to help offset those costs for the synthetic turf. So we're going to talk about what the different options are, but if we went with the option that is being recommended by the athletic director and coaches, we would be looking at a total cost of $640,470, which after you take those two accounts away, we end up with an additional $51,000 that would need to come out of either our plant facilities or general maintenance accounts.
Do we have any idea why it stopped in 2016?
I could not find any indication as to why, except for
Did we get a new business manager then?
there were new business managers, but there were two different business managers that worked through the process that we had. But I would actually probably chop that up more to transition in leadership, both at the high school and at the district office level, that either weren't made aware or made other things priorities. That would be my best guess as to why those had stopped. But it is an important thing for us to consider. And as I've talked with Mr. Ankeny and Mr. Rowe, it's important for us to start now looking at 10 years from now when we need to replace again, so that because we won't have the benefit of those remaining bond funds that time. So we'll be working through a plan to try and save those funds over that 10 years. But if you could pull up to the proposal that was sent by Hellas, and I would just like to kind of give the floor to Justin just to talk through what those options are and what that process looks like, if you wouldn't mind, Justin.
Sure, thank you very much. Appreciate the board and Superintendent Gee for having me here. So we get a lot of questions on our name, Hellas Construction. So if you look at the Olympics, a German athlete will have Deutschland on his uniform, a Spanish athlete will have Hispania, and a Greek athlete will have Hellas. So that's what they call Greece in their native language. Since we are a true sports facility manufacturer and installer, we thought that would be the best thing since sports originated in Greece, so hence the name Hellas Construction. We manufacture turf for, I think we're up to a dozen NFL teams now. We just replaced the turf in Idaho State University in Holt Arena, as well as Pocatello High School, Idaho Falls High School, and then I believe last year we also did Madison High School in Pittsburgh. So the turf we're proposing here is our Generation 3 turf. So your last turf is Generation 2 called Matrix, and the new one is called Matrix Helix. This first one talks about cooperative purchasing. All the other Idaho schools, including Idaho State, use the cooperative purchasing to procure their turf. The base proposal is for the 77,600 and change feet of turf. It will also use a similar infill to what you have now, which is made out of crumb rubber and a sand base layer. We had 2 different iterations of the field design that we wanted to bring before the board, just because how the cooperative purchasing starts, we have to start with a very, very basic proposal. So this is our very first design with the standard end zones with some extra lines in there, similar to what Notre Dame has on their field. The new logo, M in blue with the gold outline, and the alternating panels of the green on the field, which is kind of the newer style, along with the blue border and the white coaches box, and as well as the small dash lines for yardage, the small dots for yardage, and then media lines, which is becoming very common to keep photographers and other people around that have field access off the field. The next picture down will show the alternate for Middleton and Vikings in the end zones, similar to what you have now, but that option we just separated out so the board could discuss that. The other alternate would be for what is becoming increasingly common, which is a shock pad underneath there. We call it a shock pad, but it's really an anti-shock pad. Probably 70–75% schools in the US are now going to a shock pad just with the increase in head-to-ground injuries. We will not take those away, but we can definitely reduce that. The pad that we have for this field, there's really not a football specific testing agency, so we use FIFA, which is the soccer international agency. And the pad that we're recommending has a FIFA 2-star rating, which is the highest rating for the pad. While the turf has an 8 to 10 year lifespan, the pad has a 20 to 30 year lifespan. So 10 years down the road, when the turf gets rolled up and replaced, the pad remains, and then the new turf is laid down on top of that. And you should get at least 2 life cycles to 3 life cycles of that pad. So
Sorry, go ahead, Barry.
They didn't have that back then, though, on our original install.
they did, but probably 10% of the schools really use that. It went from turf being very, very thin, like they used in the Astrodome, with a big pad underneath it. Turf got longer, they filled it with infill. They were like, we can take that cost away because now we don't need that shock absorption. Turf is once again comes shorter. It still has the same infill, but now we're trying to protect the athletes as much as we can. So we're recommending that, and schools understand that.
So we currently have pad.
You currently do not have a pad.
Okay.
So underneath the turf, like this, which is the basic way you build it, is with about 8 to 10 inches of crushed rock. So the turf sets on top of that. These fibers will stand up and the infill goes inside of that. What we will be suggesting, there's 2 types of pads on there. I really believe the basic pad will be your best choice. This pad has a geotextile fabric on it that keeps it separated from the rock. And then this pad has all these little feet that act as a shock absorber. When you stand on it, when you really push on it, you can't feel it. But if you stand on it, if you walk on it before the turf's installed, then you can really feel the shock damping.
And so as you look at that, if we can roll back to the second page. Right in there. So you can see there are three alternate that you can look at. The base proposal has that $524,430 cost to it. And then the first alternate is that end zone lettering like what we have currently. And then the second alternate is and what you just showed them was the GMAX.
GMAX drain pad, correct.
And then there is a third alternate, which is a Soteria shock pad, which have a higher cost to go with it. You don't even want to talk.
It has a small amount of extra shockability and a little longer life, but I think that the ROI on that extra pad really isn't needed. We have some rules in our leadership on what we put on proposals, and that was included. But I think that the extra dollars for that would probably be going somewhere else. I think the GMAX drain is far sufficient if it meets FIFA 2-star soccer rating. I'm a soccer guy. I've played on those fields before. It's great. It's a great product.
And so our football coaches and athletic directors are recommending the base proposal plus alternate 1 and alternate 2. And that was the price that is listed on that, the proposal, the $640,470 total.
Did you say 1 and 2 or?
Yes, 1 and 2 plus the base amount.
Okay.
And that's where you get that $640,470.
And I will say that the turf that's out there now for 11-year-old turf does look good. It's just reached the end of its lifespan. The facilities, upkeep on it has been good. With the new turf, there's also included a new piece of grooming equipment that when we install the turf, we'll come out, we'll set up for the turf, the height and the infill that you have, and then give on-site training for facilities or maintenance or whoever's going to be doing that, just so they can keep this lasting as long as it has. This is I've talked with Mr. Ankeny several times since I started in 2018. We've come out, we've done a couple small repairs. We've come out, we've used maintenance to do a couple small deep cleanings. But it's a long-term relationship that we're proud that we've had for the last 11 years, and we definitely like to keep it going with Middleton High School.
Mr. Rose, do you have anything to add?
We've just got a couple substantive questions. What have schools done in the past with maybe keeping some of the old turf?
You don't have as much as you'd like.
There you go. It's a fundraiser.
You can, if somebody wants a square of it. I will say that turf has had a lot of bodies running on it and other things on it. So there are some places that recycle it and people will use it in their yards. That's if you want it, that's good.
You're retiring.
Yeah, maybe batting cages would be a good use for it.
That as well. Subsequent building, that would be, I think we'd like to hold on to it. I think, is that common?
Yes. I mean, you don't want it all, do you?
It's okay to be a
You just want
hoarder.
small part of it.
Maybe we should discuss that later.
Yeah. Before we go to the remove and replace, we can talk to that, and we'll call this a remove and replace. It is more of a maintenance issue than a new construction issue. But yes, it's very common for schools that will have a certain amount of size set up. I will say that you're dealing with about 6 pounds a square foot with the infill that's in there. So if you're gonna move it, you're gonna need either a piece of equipment or else cut it into smaller sections. So we have to have that weight to hold that turf in place when the athlete goes into it. That turf doesn't slide on them like a bathroom carpet, nothing underneath it. So, but yes, if you'd like some of it, it's yours until we load it on a truck and haul it away.
And then can you speak to the time frame that Hellas can actually do the installation in?
Part of the great part of this cooperative project and how we are a national company, we're able to hold this price today for install when you'd like it in, let's say May, let's say June, let's say July. It's really up to the school. It's up to what activities are going on, and we can work around that.
But we could get it in in next summer, we could get it in at some point so that it's ready to go for next season.
100%.
Okay.
And so you said that we have like the heat matrix 2, we're moving to the matrix 3.
Yeah, it's from matrix to matrix helix. So
Okay,
we found
gotcha.
a
Matrix
process from, it's a monofilament filled fiber. So each fiber is made individually and sewn into its pile. We found a process to put a helix twist in that fiber that helps it stand up rigid instead of laying down. So laying down, turf fibers wear from the sides, standing up, they wear from the end. Also, cleat interface with the fiber standing up is better, cleat disengagement is better.
Yeah.
So it's a safer fiber. There are a lot of cheap turfs out there, and we don't make those. So we want to make a quality product at a quality price. An ACL to a high school athlete, since there's only 99% of the athletes are done after that, is an entire year of their season. We want to try to lower the risk of injuries as far as we can. So same thing with the NFL. That's why.
And we're not working on Gen 3 and we're gonna get caught with Gen 2.
No.
Okay,
You've
This is
got
the
the
latest and
latest
greatest.
and the greatest.
Okay.
So there's nothing out there better.
Would you mind passing the samples?
Sure.
So they can see the twisting part to this.
As opposed to a straight fiber. You can see these fibers have that helix to it. I'm sorry. Okay.
You can see the twist in them.
Better than real grass, I guess.
Of course it is. Yeah, it's our patented design. That's the only fiber that, I believe would be from our products in the state. So everybody has gone to that just because it is, the safest, longest lasting.
Guess it's a little late to go back to real sod.
You can, but your overall cost for a grass field with agronomics, with striping.
I was gonna say you'd
and the
have to
maintenance
paint
is,
it every,
long term, it's higher than artificial turf water.
that's true. We're in a drought.
Nobody plays on the grass anymore.
Yeah,
Mowing,
Yeah.
it's all turned up, yeah. Man hours involved.
Any other questions for either Mr. Rose or Justin?
You mentioned that, is this the supply one tow behind ground driven sweeper that is the item that you mentioned
Correct. Your
comes with
current
the price?
Correct. Your current, what we call it a groomer, is just a brush that is driven along the ground. So this one has a ground-driven brush off the wheels it's towed that spins the top of the turf, will take broken fibers and put it into a catch basket and also uneven infill and put it into a basket and then spreads it out. And then you empty the baskets and you take out the broken particulates out and give it.
I just had one question. Is there any kind of practical solution to extend the life, like some sort of covering that you put on? Is that practical at all?
No, not really. So there's two things that will shorten the lifespan of artificial turf. There is sun, UV degradation. We have built-in UV stabilizers based at a 15-year lifespan, just because most performance athletic fields won't last longer than that 8 to 10. And the other is use. If you don't use it, it'll stay beautiful forever. But just due to wear, really do that. If you ever want to open up your facility to outside use, youth football, youth soccer, then you just need to take into account that will shorten the lifespan of that turf a little bit. If you could go back to your fundraising and putting money away like it was done until 2016, highly recommend that. That just saves the that big bite and the sticker shock when it comes back for replacing that turf.
Sounds good.
Any other questions or?
Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
thank you, Justin. Thank you, Mr. Rose. Appreciate it.
All right, discussion item I.
Okay. Last month, we talked about a bunch of the different options that we have with failure of the bond for the temporary placement for our students over the next 2 to 3 years. Wanted to go through just some of the information that we've gathered since then. The first thing I wanted to discuss is the elementary facilities planning report that I have. It's one that looks like this.
Mhm.
And what we did with that is we tried to estimate based on growth of this year from last year at this time to this year at this time, how many total students we grew, and how many, and we did that by cohort. So rather than looking at it on a per school, because our goal was to try and find out, okay, how many classrooms do we really need to plan for? Because you could look at it and say, okay, well, every 25 students, we have an average of 23.62 students per classroom at the elementary level. You could say, okay, every time you get 25 students, you need another classroom, except that we've got 3 schools, 6 grades if you count kindergarten, and so those students are all spread out. And so just looking at it that way wouldn't be an accurate picture. So we wanted to kind of get an accurate picture of that growth per cohort per year. And so we looked at that, we estimated that we would see 30 students per grade level per year increase. That's the average of those yellow numbers in the yellow there. If you're looking at 30, split that up between 3 schools, you get 10 students per classroom per year. Not per classroom, sorry, per grade level per year. And so as we started planning that, if you scroll down to the next, what we did is we took Mill Creek and started estimating what we would guess their class sizes would be for each of the next 3 years based on that kind of growth. Now, obviously, every year that's going to be different. It could increase, the number of students could increase, the number of students could decrease, depending on economic factors and all kinds of other things. But we wanted to plan kind of worst case scenario, or I should say, the most accurate case scenario we could do. So as we started looking through, we started estimating based on overages of the, kind of the total max number of students we can have in a class based on policy, based on recommendations. And what you start seeing is that in the green is when we would expect to have a classroom for that grade level in that school. If you remember Mill Creek, we're getting 4 classrooms here in November. Those are still on schedule to be delivered and installed in November. We're working through what those logistics will look like to get students in there. But they'll have 4 additional classrooms starting this winter. Because of that, you see Mill Creek's needs being pushed down further into that 2025, 2026. But when we move to Heights, which is the next space there, you start seeing that happening more quickly. The numbers are reaching over that expected amount sooner because we're not adding any classrooms to Heights this year. Currently, Heights is at 134% of capacity. And so you see, we're going to be looking at possibly needing 5 new classrooms in that 23-24 next year. Also, with Heights, you see that in that last grade coming in 25-26. When we start looking at Purple Sage, currently Purple Sage has room at their school, and those rooms are indicated by those yellow, and I'm not saying that 4th and 5th grade are the ones that will stay in the building instead of going to a modular, just needed to place 2 of them in there. But we would fill 2 of the classroom needs with space that we currently have at Purple Sage, and then we would need 2 additional classrooms for next year. Then as you look at Purple Sage, they fill in on those other 2 years after that. So we're expecting, if we go up to the next table, we would expect 14 classrooms worth at the elementary level within the next 3 years, thus needing roughly 7 portables just to meet that need if we continue to grow at the rate that we're anticipating. And that's just looking at the elementary, remembering that at our middle school and high school, we are currently at 85% of capacity at the middle school, 91% of capacity at the high school. And so there's a chance that we're going to start needing those classrooms sooner. We haven't done as in-depth an analysis there. We have to look at that a little bit differently, but it's very possible we start needing some classrooms. We can meet that need initially at middle school by moving our curriculum and special ed offices and training classrooms out of the middle school, but we would need a place to place them. So we probably need some portables to meet that need. In addition, we've been trying to incorporate a behavior program for our elementary age students that is probably, if you were to ask our principals, one of their number one needs that they see. And for that, you need space, a different place for them. And so some of those classrooms at the middle school that we have in question mark are based on that, what we're looking at trying to do with our behavior program. So that's kind of the summary when you're looking at that. And then we had talked about some other options in terms of moving the 5th grade from our elementary schools over to where the academy is currently, and then repurposing the red brick building and the back end of the rec center to get for the academy students. And if we did that, we would anticipate that the majority of those classroom needs at the elementary level would go away, meaning we wouldn't need those portables to come in. The cost of those portables at the current rate of about $250 per portable. For 7 portables, we're going to be looking at $1.75 million. Now, we asked Benetton Construction and Design West to come in and give us some estimates of what it would cost. They did some walkthroughs of our current facilities over there. And you see, can you make that a little bit bigger? Thank you. So you can see the red brick building renovation. They're looking at a cost, there's about 11,000 square feet. It costs about $185 per square foot at about $2 million to renovate. And a lot of that is coming in cost. There are things that you're going to have to look at. You're going to have to look at asbestos abatement. You're going to have to look at a totally new HVAC system, some significant issues with the roofing and things like that to make those rooms livable for our students. Same with the back end of the community center. It actually has a little bit higher cost per square foot, but there's less of it. We would be looking at about 3 classrooms over there, 7 classrooms. And there are some maps. Do you have those maps on there? There are some maps that you can look at. This is the red brick building, right? Am I looking at, all right, yeah. Now it's listed as Middleton Academy, but I mean, we're just talking about that as the red brick building there. You can see kind of that layout of where those classrooms are. There's a cafeteria space in the back corner of that red brick building, so it can be, we could feed all of our students there. We'd be working through a process for that. In the back end of the rec center, you have actually 4 classroom spaces and some office spaces as well that we would be looking for with what we have there. And that would allow the rec center to continue to operate as a rec center with our space being in that back end.
That's where my dad went to high school.
Right.
It's been there a few years.
Yeah, it's been there a few years. And it would take that considerable investment to make that, get those classrooms up to speed. And so as you can see, the cost of the portables, 1.75 roughly for just the elementary. This move, even though it involves the academy, would provide that same level of space. But those 5th grade students would all be in, instead of being in a portable, they'd be back here in the space for the Middleton Academy.
Because the portables don't have restrooms.
They don't. They don't have restrooms. And that's another thing that we'll be having to follow up with the city in terms of code, in terms of the number of classrooms that the current restroom facilities are allowed to maintain. If they can maintain them, we can let the students walk in the building. It's not the optimal, but if they can't, then we have to start looking at plumbing and restroom facilities with the portables as they come in, which will add costs.
Elementary students we're sending across.
Correct.
Outside.
And currently that's what Mill Creek is doing, what Heights is doing, they have to send their students across in now. So. So that's some of the information that is coming in. Let's see. I think that was the main thing there. Any questions on that part?
It's $185 a square foot for the renovation, but how does that compare to the cost of new construction?
New construction right now is averaging about $327 per square foot. And that's in the western region. That doesn't include the East Coast at all.
So just a little more than half.
Yep. Yep. And then, you know, the cost, obviously the cost per square foot for those portables is even smaller.
Right.
The total space that you're going to be getting. One of the things that we have to consider as well with when we start talking about those portables and the number of students going in is our cafeteria space. Currently, you know, those cafeterias were built for the capacity of that building in mind, not the additional amount. So there may be some things that we're going to have to be looking at from that perspective as well.
I don't see the portables as being apples to apples with that.
No.
Because it's just a
well, the
class.
lifespan is so much shorter as well.
Really temporary.
Band-Aid. I would like to see a number on that.
On the cost of,
No, actually, I mean, just looking at construction wise and everything else, I mean, not trying to be a naysayer or anything else, has anyone would love to leave the rec center just the way it is, okay? But looked at encompassing the entire building.
yes, and we haven't
So
started.
the rec center would go away.
That is something that we might have to be looking at. We started with this idea of trying to leave the rec center intact and
Right.
looking for ways to do that. But that's something that I've already had a conversation with Tim O'Meara that is a possibility that we
Right.
might.
I mean, I think it needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
We own the property.
Yep.
So, I mean, it would be unfortunate that the rec center's there, but that's part of, I mean, we didn't get a bond passed.
Right.
So we've got to make necessary adjustments
Right.
for the betterment of the students and where we need to go in the future. So I think everything needs to be looked at.
Right. No, and so I will ask Design West to give us that estimate for our November meeting as well.
Okay.
We got to
That's
make a
not
quick
bad.
price so we can.
Well, but now you're talking the
Gymnasium and.
gymnasium area instead has a kitchen and
Yeah.
everything else. So, I mean, there's things in there could be very beneficial,
Right.
you know, as far as that goes, but it's something we need to look at.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'll have that ready for November. Another thing that we have going, and it's just in terms of looking long distance planning, we'll have our committees come together and talk about this, is we are getting that whole property appraised. We're getting an initial realtor's estimate. The appraisal, if the board chooses to go that route to appraise that whole property, which would encompass all of that area there as well as the district office space, to appraise that, there will be a pretty significant cost just because of the size of that. So we had a realtor come through to give us an initial estimate on what that would look like. And then I'll bring that to the board when we have that report and we can determine if you would like me to go forward with a full appraisal of that property as well. Other questions on that part?
Well, it might be a hybrid approach where the rec center is actually incorporated for daytime use, but it's still available.
Right, that's another way of being able to have that
It's-
happen.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Well, the school facilities are open to community
Yep.
anyways, right?
Yep.
So there's.
Yep, we would coordinate with those kind of things. It just wouldn't be under their control, the building level, so. Other questions on that part? Have one other item just I wanted to bring to the board's attention, and this is where the analysis of real estate development impact on Littleton School District, that document. What we had is the city council has asked that developments now come and meet with the school district to talk about the mitigating impacts, helping mitigate the impacts of their growth. So when you start looking through that, what we wanted to do, and if we can just look at that summary to start with, is that summary on?
Yeah, they're fine.
I think that's it right there. Yeah. So
This one here.
essentially what we needed to do is we needed to make a determination of essentially the impact that a student has, the financial impact when a student comes in and we're over capacity, what do we have to do as a district and what are the costs for that? And so we went through a process to do that, but essentially we started with the temporary facilities. So we're talking portable classroom units just first. And the physical facility cost impact per student comes out to that $5,089 after you take into account the cost of the portables, cost of the curriculum materials, technology, furniture, and subtract out the state funding per student that comes in for those materials. And then when you factor that in with the student generation rate for elementary students, that 0.219, you actually come to a cost on that step 3 of $1,114.60 per lot. So you could assume that a subdivision coming in with 150 homes, there would be 150 times 1,114, so about $150,000 would be the impact that subdivision is having on the growth in our school district.
Per year.
What?
Per year?
That's just for the physical facilities, because the per year cost, the state reimburses us for those costs. So the cost of the teacher, the cost of supplies and things for those students, we get that from the state. What we don't get is physical facility costs. But then you start looking at, okay, that's for the temporary structures, and that's when you start looking at that cost difference of cost per square foot, and going from well under that 150 per square foot for a temporary structure like a portable up to 327. And that's the factor I use to calculate this amount. That estimated cost per lot goes up to about $6,300. And that's if you could gather that over a whole lot of time and maybe even do that retroactively, then you could say that's going to provide enough funding for the schools that are going to be required by these students coming in. And so the rest of that report, and that we'll make that report available on our website, and you had access to that, goes into the details of how we came up with those numbers. And I won't go through all of that right now, but the other thing to recognize is that we did this primarily just for elementary students, because that's the group that is being referred back to the school district by the city council, is any kind of subdivision that's being placed in our school district boundaries for those elementaries that are over capacity. If we were to increase that to include all K-12 and the impact that it's going on, you're going to actually have to use that 0.569 factor instead of the 0.219 factor. And that's going to obviously increase that about double. You're going to be closer to $12,000 per lot to make that happen. As of now, we've had a few of the developers reaching out. No official, we are not in a position to be able to negotiate. All we can do is give the information of here's the cost and let the city see that, so that the city then knows there ought to be this kind of impact coming back to the school district. And so we're in that initial phase right now of developing that relationship, and how that information transfer will happen between the school district and the city, because the city has the enforcement ability, the school district doesn't. All we can say is this is what it costs. We can't say you have to give us these funds. And so we're working together with the developers and the city to establish how that's going to happen. We're also, I wanted to let the board know that I've had some initial conversations with some groups that are working towards impact fees at the legislative level to change the law to allow schools to collect impact fees. And there are two different bills that looks like they're going to be carried by Representative Skog and Mike Moyle separately. They're both approaching it from a different perspective. And so those will most likely be a part of the legislative session, and we're trying to have our foot in the door to be able to offer input on those as well. Any questions? Okay, so that's where we're at. And then we do probably need we need to make some decisions as a district on some of these purchases relatively soon, especially portables, if we're going to be looking at those portables for next year. The provider that we were using this year has indicated that he will have some that could be ready June 1st, but we need to be getting on those here by November. So in November's board meeting, I'll be coming with a proposal to you as a board. And if there's any suggestions, input you want to have on those, and these are all just the temporary fixes to that, please let me know.
Thank you.
A lot of good information. Yeah.
Let's move on to policy review.
Pass this down.
So the first policy in front of you, and these are all first readings tonight,
Okay.
is our graduation requirement policy.
That's what's coming down to
It
right
looks
now.
like the procedure attached twice in your packet, and so this is the actual policy. There's very minimal changes to the policy. There was one sentence you see in the third paragraph that ISBA is making a recommendation for changing how that reads. And then there's 3 cross-references that they've added to this based off the new self-directed learning law that came down last spring. So any questions on the actual policy? Okay. So then the second one on the list is the 2700 is the procedure for high school graduation requirements. You'll see it looks like there's pretty hefty changes to this procedure. What we did is really tried to make sure that it was easier to read. So we took the information and put it in a table format. And so in your packet, if you look under that procedure piece, you'll see that. We also, there were some requirements the state has removed. So math, the senior year of high school, is no longer a required component. So we just adjusted that language to make sure we are in line with current state law on that. And then as you scroll through that, the college entrance examination is no longer required by the state. So that's an area that ISBA has recommended that we cross that out, and then we can determine as we move forward as a local agency how we want to support that or what that looks like, but no longer part of that graduation requirement piece. Under senior project, we wanted to make sure, especially given some of the traction we've gained with the apprenticeship, that we involve and include the apprenticeship as part of that language through that process as well. So you'll see the addition there with the apprenticeship. The civics test, there was just some new language to remove the class of 2017 since we're obviously past that implementation phase and make sure that we're up to date with that new language. And then alternative programs, the extended learning opportunities, mastery-based education, once again, aligns with the new self-directed learning law that has come into play. So just some language changes there. And then another big change to this procedure is Dr. Croft has asked, and we've been working with him to change the alternative high school graduation requirements and to reduce those down to the state minimum. And so currently we've been holding them to the district standard, which is 48 credits. The state minimum is 46. So it would remove those 2 credits and help them work with their students to graduate on time. And he feels like that would be a good transition for them to make. And so that's a conversation that we're having, and then working through the plan if students move back and forth, what that looks like. And
Do we know the student number impact on removing 2 credits for alternative school?
do you have a better-
I don't have a better, I've asked Mr. Croft to get a summary of that, but he hadn't been able to do that yet. But that's something, this is one that we'll have 2 or 3 months to look at, so he is aware.
So what you'll see in this second table is really what it removes is our district requirement of those 2 PE credits, and then just allows some flexibility with those elective credits for those at the academy. And so that's where that shift is different from our current regular high school graduation credits to the alternative. And they will still offer PE, it's just giving that flexibility of how those elective credits are earned. And then really no language changes in our early graduation piece of that procedure.
Okay.
And I might also add that on the alternative school graduation, we are the outlier of having the expectation be higher than the state minimum. Almost every alternative school I've been a part of, and I would dare say the majority, have that state minimum as the expectation for graduation from an alternative program, where that's kind of the goal, is to help them work through that graduation.
Any questions on this procedure? The next one on the list is the procedure. So if you remember, we've gone through the policy 2470, which is the new self-directed learner policy. that ISBA has recommended with that new legislation that came out last year. And so there's now the procedure, which really outlines our steps that we're gonna take for our students to become designated as self-directed learners and what requirements those would need to take. And then there's a form, which is the application that students will fill out as well. And so those next two on the list are the first draft of the procedure that's in front of you that outlines really what our steps are. We've aligned that to state code and then also ISBA's recommendation. There was some flexibility in different pieces that we can utilize, which just aligns with our testing. So what assessments are we gonna look at? Is there a GPA requirement? Is there a grade requirement? And so we've added some of those specific components to it that's to our school district. But other than that, pretty straightforward with the ISBA recommendation on that procedure. And then same with that form. We went ahead and aligned that to what we're recommending in the procedure, so then those two align as that's filled out as well.
Makes sense.
Questions on those?
This is our first draft of this,
Yes.
so we'll have some time to.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would recommend on all four of these that we discussed that we do take those through the second and third reading just because of the changes and
Yeah, okay.
the difference there. And then the last two that are in front of you tonight are policy 2420, the parent and family engagement, and then the procedure that follows. And really, there are absolutely no changes that we're recommending to this, but per federal guidelines, it is something when we do our federal programs audit this year that, and every year as we do our self-assessment, it's a policy and procedure that we have to update yearly. So it needs to be brought to the board yearly with a revision date just to stay in compliance with that component. So those two we would actually recommend, if you're comfortable, since there are no changes to it, that we just move those forward tonight with the revision date of tonight's board meeting.
So that one moved to policy, right?
Yeah, so E and F, we would make that recommendation.
And the rest moved to a second reading.
Yes.
You have a question? It's okay?
No, I'm,
Sure?
thank you.
You bet. So, anybody have any questions? I would entertain a motion to move. You'll have to say each policy,
Consider action items.
A, B, C, D, to a second reading.
I move that we move to second reading, policy 2700, high school graduation requirements, policy 2700 PR, high school graduation requirements, policy 2470 PR, self-directed learning procedure, and policy 2470F, self-directed learning form to a second reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I would entertain a motion to move policy 2420 and 2420 PR to policy.
I move that policy 2420 and 2420 PR be moved to an action item.
To policy.
To policy.
Policy.
No, second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. Let's move on to some more action items.
Really quick, just,
Yep.
there was one typo that I made a mistake on. I had put 310,
Okay. Oh,
but that should be 410.
410.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and all of our other documentation, it's 410 and 420, so
No, you're correct.
make sure that that action item is correct.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve or deny the financial correction for account 420 and 410.
Make a motion to go ahead and approve the change, the financial correction for accounts 420 and 410.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Moving on to approve, deny emergency operations plan. I would entertain a motion. Either way.
I'll move to approve the emergency operation plan.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. I would entertain a motion to approve or deny the dance team out-of-state trip.
I move that we approve our dance team's out-of-state trip to Disneyland, Disney World, and I hope they have a heck of a time.
I think they will. Is there a second?
I'll second
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
it. Aye.
Aye. I would entertain a motion to approve or deny the district gifted and talented plan.
I would move that we approve the district gifted and talented plan.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I would entertain a motion to approve or deny the turf replacement bid.
I move that we approve the turf replacement build with options 1 and 2 added onto it.
Second it.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 No, no, it's all right. It's all
Do
good.
I just need to go first or do we?
No, you just move into.
Okay. We are now gonna move into executive session, but I need to, I need a motion and they need to read both. Okay, thank you.
I move to enter executive session as per section 74-206, section 1B of Idaho Code to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent. And as per section 24-206-1F, to communicate with legal counsel for a public agency to discuss the legal ramifications and legal action for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated, but immensely likely to be litigated.
Is there a second? Thank you. And then we go in by roll call and
Trustee
then,
Moore,
Yes.
trustee Dempsey,
Yes.
trustee Wagner.
yes,
Trustee Powell,
Yes.
trustee Clark.
Yes.
everyone is dismissed, but if you'll come up, we'll sign your paper so you can get approved for that. And we're gonna have